You're here because you couldn't help yourself. You expected to sit across from me and feel nothing but reassured. Like that recent day when you shouldered your weapon and somehow missed.
Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the Desert Island Institute of Film. I am your hostess with the mostest, Diet Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul can't be with us today. He's on assignment in Milwaukee. So, it's Thanksgiving weekend, or Thanksgiving week. What do you do? What do you don't? Why don't you watch a good movie? Why don't you watch something you've never seen? And maybe you've never seen this, David Fincher's The Killer. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. Any of the information available in this video you'll be able to find in trailers or on IMDb. There's no plot point spoilers in this. I'll give you a rating at the end along with Dr. Paul. We'll give you a rating as well. So let's get into it. Decentralization of the movie-making powers that may be led to many shakeups in the zeitgeist of filmmaking. Gone are the days of buddy cop dramas and the soulless action grift. Well, maybe not completely.
That's what I'm talking about.
No longer are they just surface-level characters. We have deep, richly textured worlds, canvassed by characters more diverse than previous eras would allow. And as much as I love Lethal Weapon, Rush Hour, and Die Hard, I yearn for something more. Released on November 10th, 2023 on Netflix, The Killer is David Fincher's 12th theatrical release and most recent since 2020's Mank. Adapted from a French graphic novel, The Killer follows our titular assassin on an international manhunt after his last job goes sideways. The Killer has an audience score of 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, with a critic score of 85%. Like every David Fincher film, there's really no spoon feeding happening. He dumps you right into a story, right into characters. There's not, even though there's a narrator, we're not narrating a lot of depth to the story. It's more like this guy's internal monologue, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to be honest. Now, remember, David Fincher got his start in directing music videos, so that's a form of directing that doesn't allow for, you know, a narrator or dialogue or exposition. You got to get into your story and you got to get it across, and you have about 2.5 minutes to do it. So I think you see that Fincher's just really good at that. And in turn, one of the reasons why I think his films are so successful is that you have that and you mix that with, you know, tight filmmaking and good acting, and it's a recipe for success just about all the time. And that moves my next point is it's a tight film. David Fincher doesn't make technical mistakes in directing. He obeys the laws of the land. The sound is always good. The visual quality is always good. Cinematography is on point. So technically speaking, it's a tight film. You're not going to be looking at like terrible errors in editing or sound design or cinematography. So that's the next thing is sound design, and that's something I keep going back to on this. Is the sound design in this thing is just, it's kind of awe-inspiring, to be honest. The way they introduce music into the story, the way the use of ambient sounds as opposed to a rock soundtrack when they're in a tense situation, I think it does something different for the viewer, where when you're watching Heat, yeah, that's intense, you hear the rounds going off, but it's different type of intense than what The Killer did, and The Killer was able to find it with just a little different style. We've seen it before, but we don't see it often, and I just like something new, something fresh, and so from a sound perspective, this was some of his best work. Again, this is the 4th time that David Fincher and Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have worked on a film together. I believe they did Mank together. They did A Social Network and A Girl with a Dragon Tattoo to work on composing and sound design for that film. And so you see, again, I think they're stepping it up another level every time they enter, the filmmaking realm. So kudos to them on that. As far as acting is concerned, it's really just Michael Fassbender for most of the film. We do have, you see Carrie O'Malley does a wonderful job, and while she's not the most notable of the supporting actors in it, she's my favorite in this film. Also, you have, obviously Tilda Swinton, Arliss Howard, just rock stars in terms of acting ability, and Charles Parnell too does a great job, but specifically Howard and Swinton Parnell as well. They're only in one scene. Carrie O'Malley's in a couple scenes, but they're really only in one scene, so they've got to do a lot in terms of making themselves impressive to the viewer, and they certainly do that. As far as, I think I touched on this already a little bit, runtime for a Fincher film, this was a little bit shorter, and normally I would probably complain about a short runtime because I like long movies, but this in particular, it worked. I think any more, the story could collapse a little bit under the weight of what it's trying to do, and so there's tempo and pacing that they could fall apart. So definitely a necessity in this was having the shorter runtime. And lastly, as far as the good things are concerned, there's some good comedic timing in this. I think you need a little bit of a palate cleanser, a sorbet or a piece of ginger in between these impressive settings and scenes that helps to sort of, allow the viewer a sense to recharge for a second. And there's a few scenes where you get just a little twinge of comedy here and there, and that is so necessary in a film like this. I hate to say the word bad with the David Fincher film because I'm a big David Fincher fan. He's obviously, I've said that 100 times before. But where there was some freshness and things like the sound design in this, I felt a lot of like pastiche and like going back to retread similar ground in what we've seen in not just his films, but in other films. So I kept being reminded of Fight Club. In this thing. The opening credits remind me of Fight Club. The opening scene reminded me of Fight Club. The opening monologue reminded me of Fight Club. How the main character sort of thinks reminded me of Fight Club. And I'll just say it, it's not as good as Fight Club. Let's just cut the mustard here. It's not as good as Fight Club. Fight Club is superior in any sense of the word, but it doesn't mean that the killer's bad. But what you're going to deal with now is what you have when you're so successful. You breed expectations, right? So now the expectation is I need to see an 8 out of 10 to be happy with the Fincher film, and I'm not sure that we quite get that with this. So we have constantly being reminded of how it didn't cut the mustard. It didn't achieve expectations that the same director has achieved before, and that's hurt. Also, world building, we talk about recently, we've seen John Wick, and we've seen this world play out in a different scenario. Now, granted, this is a graphic novel, but I'm talking from the movie perspective. We've seen on the silver screen 4 John Wick films, and now on Peacock, there's the Continental TV show. So we've seen this before. Sorry that you picked this subject matter to do your film on, but now you have to deal with that. You have to deal with that being in the back of people's minds and viewers' minds when they watch films. So unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. The ending was a little weird to me. I don't know, and again, this is not a film that I've seen 20 times, as I genuinely have seen every one of David Fincher's films probably at least 5 or 6 times, except for Mank. I honestly seen Mank twice. It's not my favorite. It's towards my least favorite of his films, but a lot of rewatch value normally is what I'm saying. But in terms of the ending with this, I don't know. It was a little weird to me. I expected a little bit more. I have no knowledge of the graphic novel whatsoever. I know nothing about it, other than it is a novel, graphic novel, and it's French from like 2007, I think. So I don't know anything about it, but it just felt a little bit off character at this point. We harken back throughout the film, the narrator's narrating these scenes, or the main character's narrating these scenes and going over these tenets or rules that he sort of does his jobs by, and one of them is always, they always around the same lines of, not taking risks, getting the job done, not having a heart, not having a conscience, and doing the difficult thing. And so the ending just doesn't seem, it's just weird. I don't know. The best way to put it, for those of you that get a chance to see it, meet me in the comments and tell me what you think about the ending. Maybe we'll do a video later on down the line where it's spoiler related, where we can talk about this a little bit more. But I want people to be able to watch this and not have the film ruined. So we'll leave it at that. And lastly, I touched on this for a split second right at the beginning. I was talking about Fincher getting back to basics here. Normally that's a good thing for a director like M. Night Shyamalan, getting back to basics, away from whatever the garbage that drug his career to the bottom of the abyss. So normally going back to the basics is a good thing, but I don't know that it is for Fincher. I think Fincher, the best thing about David Fincher is he's refreshing. He doesn't like to do the same thing over and over again in terms of like his subject matter. Yeah, it's going to have the Fincher feel to it, maybe a little dark and brooding, but Benjamin Button is vastly different to Fight Club, to Mank, to Alien 3, to Panic Room. I mean, they're all real different movies. The Social Network. I mean, Gone Girl, Seven. They're all different. And so this just felt like rehashing some similar stuff to me and too close to home, which is so it's going to lose score for that. It's going to get docked some points for that, unfortunately. It's the nature of the beast. I want to be entertained when I sit, and when I give you 2 hours of my life, I want to be entertained. And unfortunately, with David Fincher, I am accustomed to a certain level of entertainment. And while this movie was entertaining, and if it was directed by any other director, I probably would like it a full point higher. Fincher again turns in a technically well-made and tight film, one driven by incredible sound design, top-tier acting, and beautifully designed cinematography, all of which are staples of David Fincher's films. Unfortunately, it falls short of his best work. The visual style and pacing seemed all too close to what's seen in Fight Club and Seven, with the universe explored closely resembling that of the John Wick films. The Killer is by no means David Fincher's worst film, but it doesn't cut the mustard when comparing it to his best stuff, i.e. Zodiac, Gone Girl, or The Social Network, putting it somewhere in the middle of his directing credits, around The Game or Seven. The average moviegoer might not go head over heels for this one. It's slightly inaccessible to the average viewer, but fans of Scott Cooper's Out of the Furnace or Pale Blue Eye or Michael Mann's Collateral will want to give this one a try. I gave it a 7.7 out of 10, and Dr. Paul gave it a 8.0 out of 10. Any comments or questions or suggestions, hit us up in the comments. And we'll see you next time on the Desert Island Institute of Film.